Wait, are we now live?
We're live. It is Tuesday, January 5th, 2021, 5:02 p.m. The Proud Boys are descending on Washington. I came up with the line the other day, "Boys be not proud," in homage to John Donne, but I can't figure out the rest of the sonnet. It's been gnawing at me. If anybody wants to write "The Boys Be Not Proud" in time for tomorrow, I will tweet it. Just tweet it at me.
This seems like a hand and knee crash problem.
It does seem like that's a very good point. Maybe I'll text her while we're talking. We are not allowed to have fun anymore. We've got the electoral votes being counted tomorrow. We've got Proud Boys all over town. It's going to be ugly as hell, but we are allowed to have David Plotz, with whom I went for a long walk the other day, and he informed me. He asked after In Lieu of Fun, and I told him, I said, "When are you coming back?" And he said, "Well, when are you inviting me?" And I said, "Monday." He said, "I can't do Monday." I said, "Okay, then Tuesday." So here he is. Now, here's something you did not know about David Plotz. David Plotz is a native Washingtonian. And by native Washingtonian, I mean he grew up in Washington. His parents still live here. He is a graduate of a high school in Washington, although the sort of toniest, most absurd high school for him to have gone to.
I would dispute that. But continue.
Yeah, you could have gone to Sidwell, right? He went to St. Albans.
Didn't get into Sidwell.
Oh, really?
Sidwell.
That's excellent.
Sidwell was. They didn't let in me or my brother. My brother is really smart, and there was a little bit of Jewish quoting back then. There was still
really.
Yeah, that's
the old.
I've never heard of St. Albans. I just know about Sidwell.
The old joke about Sidwell. It's where Episcopalian teachers teach Jewish students about Quakerism, but David went to the sort of National Cathedral's boys' school, St. Alban, where they don't discriminate against Jews. They teach them about Episcopalianism properly, and when he graduated from college. So at college, he wrote. See, I know your whole bio, man. He wrote his thesis about Mayor Marion Barry. David's gonna nod. And
wait, this is college, right? We've moved. You didn't write.
Yes, not in high school.
He wrote.
It was not that Tony.
He wrote his college thesis about Mayor Marion Barry, who was admittedly a fascinating character. And here's the inspired thing that David Plotz did when he graduated from college. He sent his thesis to the Washington City paper.
That's kind of awesome.
Which was kind of awesome. And Jack Schaefer, who is many of you will know as the Politico media critic, was then the editor of the City paper.
Where'd he go? Do you want to finish telling that story about your own life, David?
Yeah.
What happened?
And
then the Washington City paper got your thesis, and did they publish it?
They did not publish it, but Jack decided that I sent him some clips too from my college paper and from the newsletter I'd worked on, and he was like, "Your clips are really terrible, but the thesis is very interesting. So why don't you come and work for me?" And I did have to. My first piece was about the return of Marion Barry. Marion Barry, when I had written about him, had just gone to prison, and by the time I was going to the City paper, which was in mid '93, he had just come back to be a city council member again, and on his way to becoming mayor again after having gone to prison in this crack sting setup that had brought him down.
"Bitch set me up" is the big line.
Is that what? Oh,
that's
right.
what he's caught on camera.
He says, "Goddamn bitch set me up."
Goddamn bitch.
See,
and there was
you
a lot
guys
of
have Marion Barry, and I have Buddy
Cicilline.
Cicilline.
Who's Buddy? Wait, Buddy Cicilline is which city?
Providence. Rhode Island.
Isn't it Buddy Cianci?
Oh, but
that is Buddy Cianci. That's what I was trying to say, and then you tricked. I was trying not to say Cicilline, because that's actually,
he's actually a member of Congress.
Yes. He
Sorry.
was the mayor he's the mayor after Providence, at first gay mayor of a capital city, but when I was in college. And anyway, sorry, I digress. He hit his girlfriend's boyfriend while he was married, of course, with children, like with a lit fire log from his thing, and went to jail for a considerable period of time for assault, and then got out and was reelected.
I think if I remember, I think that there's a pretty great Gimlet podcast called Crime Town, which I think
it is absolutely
it's
phenomenal.
Season 1.
Yeah.
It has the best voices. The best voices.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really good.
But
Sorry, I digress.
All of this is merely a long way of saying that David Plotz, who has lived this city from the time of his very small childhood, is a great person to ask about the Proud Boys descending on our town. So
I am really.
Yeah, well, you're the one we got. So
good.
Tell us about hate crimes.
So what do you think? Is it great that they're all showing up? How excited should we be?
I just walked actually through the city, although I didn't go down to Proud Boy Ville, and I did not see. It didn't seem like there was much going on. I was just walking through Woodley Park and near.
But they don't come this far north.
Near DuPont Circle. But have a lot of them shown up? Are a lot of them?
I mean, there's a fairly big crowd down in downtown, but I think the big action is expected tomorrow, and MPDs, the police, have closed a whole section of, all the streets around the White House are all shut down. So, there's some. I would be surprised if there isn't significant stuff tomorrow.
And when there's significant stuff tomorrow, will the people who condemned the whatever violence there was in the BLM protests be as vocal, do you think?
I doubt it. I really doubt it. I think there's going to be... Look, the last time the Proud Boys came in force to Washington, there were multiple stabbings. There was a hate crime against a black church that there was finally an arrest in yesterday. One of the Proud Boy chieftains was arrested yesterday for destroying a Black Lives Matter sign from an AME church here in town, and when he was caught, he happened to have 2 high capacity magazines on him, so he's now being charged with that as well.
You can be charged. I actually didn't know that you can be charged just for ammunition.
It's not the ammunition; it's the magazines.
Okay.
There are registration requirements for certain guns or gun paraphernalia in Washington, and certain stuff is not registerable, and so including high capacity magazines. So it's I think it's that's good, but I do think a lot of them are going to show up, and they're going to be looking for ways to circumvent the firearms restrictions in Washington, and they're going to be, as we were talking about yesterday with Steve Vladek, unable to do what they want to do, which is storm the Capitol. And so what do they do next, right? What else is in the neighborhood?
Their meeting point is the Capitol?
Well, their meeting point is the plaza down below the Harrington, where, what is it? It's I don't even remember what it's called. It's the place by the Warner, the big square by the Warner Theater.
Oh yeah, right. Yes, I forgot what that's called. I know what you mean.
I don't know what anything's called in Washington. I just know it all by sight. So, David, you are starting a new media company since the last time we talked to you, and it is devoted to.
Is it or is it just you on Substack?
No, it is not just David on Substack. So, like, it's devoted to local coverage of exactly this
Don't
sort.
don't you think that Substack is just
Sorry.
a cruel measure of oneself? Wait, what?
It's
Why are you
it's
being
called
sorry?
Freedom. It's called Freedom Plaza. I'm informed by text message.
Oh my god. Can we actually just, before we get into, can we just have a talk about Substack?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
Are we
I
for it or
actually,
against it?
well, no, I don't. It's just, I think that you said it best. It's like, you can only have like so many like direct to inbox type of things that you're willing to do. Eventually, people are going to want the stability of having a regular paycheck and not obsessing over their followers and their subscriber numbers. It's exhausting. That's really exhausting.
Are you doing it?
Oh hell no.
Are you
Like,
guys-
I don't even like. No, I'm just
Are you
thinking
doing it,
about it
Ben?
from
I feel like
media
Ben-
perspective.
No, but I
could
feel
do
like
it.
because
Ben
I don't
would
feel
do
like
it.
well, because first of all, if I'm gonna say something, I want it to be on a platform that people can actually access. Like Lawfare. And so I have a bit of a conflict of interest. If I had like something I wanted to sell, I would do it on Substack or Patreon or whatever. But like basically when I sell something, it's on content wise, it's on behalf of Lawfare, and so I wouldn't do it that way.
But so, I mean, I feel like it's like there's a weird, and I can't think of what the right economic term of this. I'm sure one of you will know. But if you look at like an Andrew Sullivan or a Matt Iglesias, so Andrew and Matt, I think, probably are now making, $1 million a year. Andrew was probably getting paid, if he was at New York, he was probably getting paid 400, 500, or whatever it was.
I think Ben Smith's article about it even gave a number that he was making over $500,000. Like, he was exceeding his salary at New York on Substack.
Yeah.
By
sure
considerably.
Yes.
Yeah, it was
so
like
what
it was
is,
by like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And so it's like this what is it called? There's all these other people who are working in New York Magazine who are now that the profit that Andrew was providing by having that work going through New York is now flowing to him, and the organization has lost that economic benefit. And if too many people do that, then these organizations can't survive. But of course, too many people can't do that because people are just not going to subscribe to that many Substacks. So there's about 6 people who will win. So Andrew will win on it, Matt will win on it, and Heather Cox Richardson will win on it. But like, I don't think everyone can't win on it.
It's a disruption, and then it basically everything recoalesces, and it's
Disaggregation of cross subsidies. Thank you,
Yes.
Stephen Friedman. Nice.
Yeah. But the other thing is that they reform. Invariably, I mean, we're seeing this with Hulu was free and streaming. Then Hulu slowly started subscription rates. Then Hulu slowly began partnering with other streaming services, and now you get Hulu as a package with like NBC and all of these, and so this is kind of this kind of reworking of things is eventually everything rebundles. And even and I'm sure that there will be like a bundling that is as great as the cable packages once were.
Right. Right.
And so unless there is something else to disrupt it again, I just feel like there was a huge disruption with blogs and like individual posting. We didn't call when Josh Marshall started TPM like a Substack, but that's basically what it was, except he was publishing, he wasn't doing paywall stuff. But then
But isn't the real significance of Substack that it allows a evaluation of, back when we started putting media organizations on the web, we were able to figure out what percentage of the clicks associated with Slate are David Plotz. And now we can actually figure out in this very raw way, what is David Plotz worth? Just in raw financial terms. How much is David Plotz worth in revenue terms? And over time we should expect a more rational bundling of in economic terms more rational, not necessarily in intellectual terms. But the Ben, Kate, and David package is worthless, but the David so and so and so and so package is worth a shitload, and so that's the economic incentive to emerge is the package that actually will generate the most revenue, which is precisely what the daily newspaper protected against.
But isn't Kate's point more true, that actually it isn't like that you get to a rational state? It's just these things kind of have flows. I mean, they at one point they flow towards aggregation, and you're like, oh, of course it makes sense to have the New Yorker gather all these people together, and now it's a profitable magazine. And then at other moments it seems like, well, a few of us can go off and have an escape velocity that allows us to live separately. And then in 3 years, when people stop wanting to listen to Matt on his Substack, or when Andrew has said all the things he said, they'll get folded back in. But it's not because one is more rational, like that one is a rational state.
No, I think we're using the term rational differently, right? So I'm using the term rational in purely economic terms, as in like the resources go to the
least cost,
to the least cost,
like highest
deliver. Exactly. So you get the Substack allows you to test your market worth and realize your market worth. And then
but it's not, I would dispute that too. It's like it's people who get there first. It's people who get their advantage because they had some other platform they could port over to it. I mean, I don't think that the people that Matt Iglesias, who I think is the best, is
you think that's sustainable?
Well, have you seen Patreon?
Matt Iglesias,
it's different.
Matt Iglesias will do great on Substack until people get bored of him, and then it'll tail off. And over time, if he's not super compelling, I like Matt, although I spent 10 years thinking he hated my guts. But like if he's not compelling on Substack, people aren't going to keep paying X bucks a month to see Matt Iglesias if they don't think it's compelling.
Well, that's a little bit was my point too, about like that is the comfort. Like, okay, so a media company, right, like that puts all these people together. If you're Andrew Sullivan, you're probably making $400,000 a year less than you could be worth in the free market, but you have like maybe just like you only have to publish once a week and not every day, because you're not like you're not directly accountable to these individual like readers, and that media company forms like basically like a nice kind of intermediary between the author and like the reader. And the same is true, like that's what I'm saying, like they're doing this, but isn't this an exhausting way to live? Like I did this for 3 years when I was like briefly in journalism when I got out of college, and I was like, there's no way in God's green earth that I'm going to do this for the rest of my life at the $28,000 a year and get like 4 hours of sleep a night. Like I couldn't do it. And like it was and I'm sure that Andrew and Matt think about this all the time. The other thing is, doesn't it, you're putting your own name and brand, your own personhood out there and your product out there every single day, and people are paying for it, and the second they don't think it's worth it, they click it off and like they unsubscribe. And I think that must be an exhausting way to live emotionally, to kind of always be like dependent on that, and like for not only like emotional validation in some way, but for your like your financial your well-being. Like they're this close to some type of huge scandal that really is a scandal, like not like a kind of something that like half of people hate them and other people decide to support them, but like a real scandal that completely wipes something out. I mean, I just kind of think that this is all, it's just like, it's all about the media ecosystem where we talk about all the time, but this is like a fascinating moment. Also, why is this different than Patreon, by the way, which is just basically the same equivalent? It's a paywalled, like you pay X number of, you gift X number of dollars per month and you get X type of content. It just seems like Patreon is more like based on charitable organizations, probably some tax implications there. But you could start it as kind of a for-profit type of enterprise.
Well, I mean, I think that Patreon, the difference is that Substack, you're leaving out the part which is really great about Substack, which is just an extremely easy to use content creation engine.
Oh, yes.
So yes. So
yeah.
the form actually matters in this case. It's like we create a very simple thing. It's really easy to do it. It's really easy to get subscribers, to set rates, and here's a set amount that we take, and it's a very simple platform, and that's a huge strength that I think is
so
underrated.
David, how many Substacks do you subscribe to?
I pay for one, which is and I did it in a spasm
moment of weakness.
The spasm of weakness, which was can you guess? I'll give you. You can each have one guess as to who I pay for. Has not been mentioned on this that I can remember on this in lieu of today.
I would have guessed Heather Cox Richardson. But no. Who is it?
Zeynep.
Tufekci.
I will pay for, if I ever get around to it, I will definitely pay for Matt, because I love reading Matt, and so like if I just haven't bothered yet.
How many Substacks do you subscribe to, Kate?
0. I've looked at Substack once.
Yeah,
you're so fluent in talking about it. Very, very well
that's
done.
because there's nothing new about it.
Yeah, like moderation for a living.
Yeah, I don't need to look at it to know exactly. I've read a lot about it, but I haven't gone to it.
I subscribe to no Substacks for a very important reason.
You don't believe in paying for media?
No, I believe in paying for media. I subscribe to many publications. I don't want more email. I don't want anybody to email me. I don't read a fifth of my email. I can't handle the volume of email that I have. The last thing I would do is pay to get sent more email.
Newsletters now seem to be transitioning wholly to Substack, and those seem indistinguishable to me. Like Substack just seems like a newsletter that you get.
Well, the media business I'm starting, which is a combination podcast, media business / Kentucky.
Oh yeah,
Fried
let's
Chicken.
actually just like start talking
Kentucky
about
Fried
that.
Chicken.
Tell us about this.
But we're gonna have
the revs will come from the Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm not going to subscribe to your newsletters. I will listen to your podcasts.
Well,
I will not subscribe to a newsletter because it will send me email.
Yes, it will send you email. But some people really like getting email.
No.
Yeah, they do. That's why
I know they do. They're wrong.
Are you a person who likes getting cards in the mail?
Oh, I love getting cards in the mail.
I love.
You don't like getting cards in the mail? Who doesn't like getting a card in the mail?
I
what
love.
Kind of monster would you be to not want to get a card in the mail?
No, I like a card in the mail. I don't know. I don't like. Okay, it's really. I like a card in the mail for no reason, or babies, or like getting married, or like happy news or something. I don't like cards for my birthday. I don't know. I just don't like them.
But Kate makes awesome cards. That's the other thing.
But
I just got a card from Kate. It had beautiful on oysters on it. It was like.
But anyways,
it was gorgeous.
We digress. But no, I don't know. I feel like if you don't get a lot of email, getting really high quality, good email, like having a Substack delivered to you like once or twice a day, be great. Whereas it just feels like an obligation to read it and like
I get 500 emails a day. I can't handle the volume. I don't like anything that prevents me from getting one more. The idea that I would pay for. So tell us about your new business, except for the part where there's going to be emails.
Yes, there will be no emails. It will just be text messages endlessly ringing on your phone. I have your phone number. It's called CityCast, and it's going to be a network of daily local news podcasts in cities around the country. We're going to start in 2 cities in March, probably. Going to announce those cities shortly. Haven't announced them yet. And in each city, we're going to have a daily podcast that's about the city and a daily newsletter as well. Shh, don't talk about the newsletter. We'll just talk about the podcast. And I think the premise of it, the podcast is, there are podcasts that essentially occupy every niche that traditional audio has been in. And so there are podcast equivalents of national news, or something like The Daily, of political conversation. I have a host of podcasts about politics for Slate called The Gabfest, of sports talk. But in local news, podcasts have not really succeeded. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, which we could go into, but we won't. But I have a theory, and a theory which is shared by Graham Holdings Company, which is the company that is backing this company that we started, that it's because it's really a business that will work well as a network, because that's the only way we can get enough scale to sell into it as an advertising business. And B, that people have approached it wrong, and that actually the opportunity for the daily local podcast is not what people think, which is like, oh, it's like a newscast or it's an NPR show. Basically, if you look at American media, 50 years ago, 80 years ago, in most cities, there was somebody who was usually a journalist, but sometimes not a journalist, or sometimes quasi-journalistic. But like if you think of Jimmy Breslin or Mike Royko, but Oprah Winfrey was this person in her early days at AM Chicago. People who saw themselves as tribunes of the city, tribunes of the people, ambassadors of the city. They loved their city more than anybody else, and they thought it was more fucked up than anybody else thought it was. And they were there.
Lips.
Yeah, and they were there. They were there when they were angry, their anger was incendiary and burned things. And when they were joyful, their joy was infectious. And it works okay in column form. Podcasting is the most intimate medium. Radio is already incredibly intimate, emotional medium. Podcasting is like a okay informational medium. You can learn things, but really it's very good at making you feel things, because the human voice, especially the human voice when it's like delivered earbuddishly, is so intimate and connected. And so it's my belief that if we get some podcast hosts who are just deeply warm, passionate people who are there about the city, these podcasts they're not going to substitute. We're not trying to build a media ecosystem which doesn't exist, or solve the news desert problem, which I don't think we're not in a position to do it. We don't have the budget money to do it. We're going to go to places that already have a news ecosystem. But the problem with most cities is not that there isn't news, it's that nobody gives a shit about the news. They haven't been given reason to care about it. And so what I'm hoping to do is find some hosts who just are able to convey, in the intimacy that podcasting really does better than any other medium, their care for the city and their love for the city and their anger about the city. And if it works, it'll be great.
So I'm curious, like, to link the two parts of this conversation. If this podcast were up and running in Washington,
yeah,
what would it sound like tomorrow with the Proud Boys coming to invade our town?
Yeah.
Like, who would do what?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think that question actually points to one reason why DC is probably not a city I'm going to launch in right away, which is that DC intrinsically has so many.
Means a lot to a lot more. Like, means a lot to a lot of, in a lot of different ways to a lot of different people.
Well, all cities do that, but it's that in DC, like the local and national kind of, it's very hard to separate them. And so you would definitely want to the city cast tomorrow to be about the Proud Boys, but so is all the national news going to be about the Proud Boys, and so it's not great. It's much better that you're in. I mean, like, where would you would have wanted to have a show that you started in Minneapolis in May, and to catch the BLM protests and to be there with the protests that grew up around, the crimes of the police and the kind of the movement that grew up in that city, and track that city. I think in DC, when you're doing it in DC, it's a little trickier. But what would you do? You would have our host, I would hope, would interview. The show is going to be based around an interview, and so it'll be an interview, and then there will be the kind of fulminations and thoughts of the host. Ben, you'd be good at that because you could fulminate and on your feet. But it might be, you talk to a counter protester who's out there and who is experiencing it experiencing this assault. You might talk to someone who gets hung up in it, and it's I realistically know that the audience for this is very left, and these podcasts are gonna tilt left. I don't think they intrinsically have to, but the way cities work these days, people are so lefty.
Well, cities tilt left.
Cities tilt left. So probably the audience is going to tilt left, and our hosts are probably going to tilt left. So, or maybe you interview one of the Proud Boys and just have a very fucking contentious, you're a piece of shit. You're here doing violence to this country, doing violence to the Constitution you purport to be there defending, to the people the hundreds, 50 million people who voted. And I hope you go back to wherever the fuck you're coming and you lose your job. So I think the Proud Boys is a tricky case. It's much easier when you think of it as a city that is focusing on affairs that are the cities and not necessarily affairs that are really the nation's.
So there are two things. One is that when you first started talking about this, and I the podcast, without it being the podcast, you were just kind of saying that you want to do a city by city, and it immediately reminded me of the American News Independent Network. Do you know about this? It was a short-lived kind of nonprofit group. It actually was where Dave Weigel, I don't know if you wrote for a long period of time. He wrote for the Washington Independent with Spencer Ackerman and Laura McGann, I think, who's now a Politico and has been there for years as the politics editor. But the Washington Independent had the New Mexico Independent and the Colorado Independent and all of these various type of, and they had a few local journalists, bloggers that they basically did, and they put it all on. It was all print journalism online, and it was kind of you'd have it was basically what you were trying to do, the opposite of what you said, which is you said, this is not replacing local media in any way. It was trying to kind of build and support local media back up. It was a failed enterprise. It was mostly because it was all free and there was a lot of issues, but I can send you a link about the business side of it. But there's that. I just didn't know if you knew about that, because it kind of operated it kind of it was just always kind of in the background, and then it just disappeared after 3 years of existing, and people forget about it.
Did Annie Lowry work there too?
Yeah. Yep.
That's right. When I hired Annie from there, I remember that.
Yep.
Yeah. I think there's this glorious efflorescence of new local digital startups that are mostly they're nonprofits. Mostly they're backed by some foundation. The Memphian in Memphis, the City in New York, what's it called? The Vermont one. I've blanked on the name of the Vermont one. It's a great one in Vermont. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I can't remember. Isn't it out of Brattleboro? I don't know. Maybe maybe not.
It's now the largest. It's now the largest newsroom in Vermont. And they're great, and they're doing a great job, and they're covering really important things, and they are uncovering wrongdoing and malfeasance of all sorts, and super valuable for the ecosystem. This is a different effort. This is we don't have the budget. This is not the economics we're a for-profit. The economics of a for-profit, when you try to build a big newsroom, are very hard to make work right now. Hopefully one day we can make that work. But what I do think the opportunity is there is to give, and what I think the medium is there for, what podcasting is there for, is to make people feel things and feel emotional connection to things. And it's a little bit weird to talk about because it's so removed from we're reporting it and we're uncovering this, and so we're all journalists, so we always want to uncover. But I actually think a lot of the job of journalism is not actually the coverage, it's the kind of why it fucking matters. Why should I care about it? What is going to make me care about it? And then connecting it to your life.
So 10 months ago, I would not have like understood what you were talking about, honestly. But I'm just going to show this for a second. This is this tiny local paper in like the Outer Cape that just covers the Outer Cape, which is not that many people. It's called the Provincetown Independent. It publishes once a week, and it is shipped by mail, and it is like the most adorable news that you've kind of ever seen. It's, it's like select board meetings, and like somebody found like a 320-pound loggerhead turtle on the beach, and here's a picture of it, and and like that, and like then it's just really, really well done. It's probably a staff full time of 2 who put together all of these stories that probably are run by, as far as I can tell, like 4 to 6 journalists, and it's shockingly, and I think maybe a lot of them out there have other jobs, but like it's a shockingly great little paper, and I read it cover to cover every week and learn so much about the area I live in and kind of appreciate the area I live in so much, and the feeling is so good. And so what I'm like, every time I read it, and I've never had that before, and so when you're talking about this, I was like, yes, that is definitely a niche that you're tapping into. And a feeling that people don't know they're missing.
It raises a really interesting question, though. How are you going to staff each of these podcasts? Is it just like you could do what you're describing with just like a host and a microphone? How richly, on the other hand, you could do it like the Daily, right? And have the entire apparatus of the New York Times behind one daily podcast. How are you, people keep popping up on the screen.
What is going on with it?
Well,
I don't know.
I'm bringing people in to ask questions, but I'm only bringing them in once, and they keep showing up again. So I'm not sure what that's about. But how are you before we go to their questions, how are you planning to staff each of the podcasts?
So, I think you could not do it simply with one host and a microphone, because they would die, and there's
Sorry,
more work.
Yes.
There's more work than just like, oh, I've recorded something, now I have a podcast. You have to.
You're talking to 2 people who have done this for 285 days in a row with
but
nothing
you're not producing it. You're not putting it out in the. It doesn't. You don't.
But we're not selling
no
ads on it.
But there's no production value. He's right. And then 2, we have like we both are like we do no research or background reading or anything.
Right.
To
we rely on
like,
the guests.
Like the whole conceit. Yes.
Right.
So
you're like talk
different.
Radio.
Yeah, we are talk radio.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which I
talk
love.
radio is totally overstaffed. They should just be the one guy.
And that one
Rush
guy should not be Howard Stern.
If he had to do his own work, he had to he wouldn't have time for all this political shenanigans. Anyway, you were saying, how are you going to staff it?
We're going to staff it with a small team in each city. So it'll be probably 4 people per city, where there'll be a host, a couple of producers, and someone for the newsletter. That's going to be them. And then there's a headquarter in our virtual headquarters. There's a small headquarter staff to handle sort of centralized functions. And then once we start to kind of get ads and stuff, there'll probably be ad teams and other people you need.
And in your dreams, what's the number of cities like that would? How small would a city have to be before you would say that's not a market for us? Like Provincetown, to use Kate's example, or would you realistically only want cities that are big enough to generate, the kind of audience that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't know yet.
It's also kind of like Provincetown has a really wealthy subscriber base. Yeah. Right? Like, I mean, like even the people that live there year round.
There's one of the most successful examples of a daily local podcast is a small town in England that has about 2,000 people live there. But it's essentially now all of them listen to this podcast. And it's become a dumb. I think probably the economics stop making sense around a city of about 100,000, like where you really start to be like, that can't work. But I also think that if CityCast works for a city of 250,000 or a city of 1 million, that we will probably end up with like a TEDx model where there'll be shows that we don't make. There's people are already making them in their own, and we'll sort of set standards of like, here's how you need to publish this thing at least twice a week. It has to be this amount of length. It has to meet this set of quality standards, and it has to be this.
What about partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, with the right places we'll partner, but I don't. What do you mean partnerships? There's like a lot of partnerships.
Like basically, like okay, so Rochester, New York, where I'm from, local paper, Democrat and Chronicle. Like they don't have podcasts, but let's say that there's some beat reporter that's like doing something, and the producer wants to cover it, and so like could the or someone eyes a story. Mm-hmm. Instead of getting your own reporter on to do the podcast, could you like?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Oh,
okay. That's what I'm. Like,
we exist in a media ecosystem that other people are doing other work in, and our job is to amplify and to bring attention to the things that we think need amplification, bring it and attention. So I expect like there will be, the Rochester transportation reporter, the reporter who broke that big bus story. You saw that big bus story. That person will be on CityCast, and we'll be glad because finally someone is outside, is paying attention.
It kind of could also be a wonderful constellation of the different types of lives that people live in different cities in America if you put them all together. Like you could kind of like do it like a hot hit on the buses in Rochester, and then like zoning like inadequacies in Detroit, which are numerous, and then like I don't know, I mean like, and then like the housing crisis in San Francisco, or like it just like you could really bounce around, and it would be like a fun thing to listen to, like all of them in the same, that are all produced kind of in the same way or a similar way and fit together sequential, like
Yeah, I mean we that kind of aspect of the network is like it's a network. It's local, but it's also a network. We have to figure out. We just got to get a couple of cities right and be like, oh yeah, this works. And now
and that will establish a kind of model.
Yeah, and then we'll try it in 10 cities and then 50 cities, and then
the world,
and then Substack will have podcasts, and we'll be posed.
Stephen Friedman, the floor is yours.
Hi, I was just trying to understand the business model. There have been a lot of attempts to do local stuff, patch, sidewalk, all kinds of things like this over the years. And you talk about network economics here. What are the network economics that benefit the people that you recruit and benefit you? Well, that wasn't clear to me from
Yeah, I mean, I think the main one has to do with the advertising you can get if you are a national network of podcasts. If you right now, podcast advertising is a really great business, but it's concentrated in places that have significant audiences and networks that have significant audiences. If you're a single public radio station in Nashville and you put out a podcast and you have 15,000 listeners on that podcast, great. That's a really successful podcast for Nashville. But if you tried to monetize it with advertising, you just can't. The market's too small. If, however, suddenly you have 50 podcasts with 15,000 and you have a network, and it's also, they're demographically attractive because that's what urban podcast listeners are extremely demographically attractive, then you can sell that podcast advertising at a pretty high CPM in a way that the single market can't. The solo operator can't. So that's the main network effect. The other economics are probably not network effects. The other economics are like, can you build something like? I mean, that's sort of true for newsletter advertising. There's some network effects for newsletter advertising. So if we have enough newsletters, like there are now newsletter marketplaces where if you have a bigger audience, it's a better sale. But I think truly this will rise and fall on whether we can come up with a product that people will pay for. So I think it's going to be a subscription product ultimately. I don't think it's certainly not going to be a subscription product right out of the gate, but ultimately I think it is a subscription product because. Go ahead, Kate.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask you how Crimetown did it with Gimlet. Well, they had Gimlet, but like they suddenly stopped, or they like were in the middle of doing Detroit and then they kind of stopped. I don't know what was going on. There was something. There was a long break at some point.
Be back again.
sorry.
You're
Hi,
back
Steven.
because you have a second question in the queue that I thought was a very good follow-up to the question you just asked. So I wanted to bring you back to pose it.
Can you remind me of it? I don't recall.
Oh, well, I'm supposed to read your question. Sure. You asked how David is going to identify and recruit local podcasters.
Yes. Right.
So now you can ask that question.
Right. There are lots of people who are doing podcasts.
Yeah.
How do you filter them? How do you vet them? How do you know that they're going to be reliable? And more importantly, how do you pay them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that part we can do. We have funding. We're backed by a big company that is making an investment in us doing this. So we have a budget, and so we've calculated how much we can pay. We're going to pay people real salaries for real jobs, but that means they have to do really good work. That piece of it, Stephen, is like the hardest piece. So we announced CityCast in general.
We could tell by your body language of going into the corner of your screen and covering your head with both arms.
Well, it's what I spend
Don't worry,
most of my
that
time
won't
on.
come
It's
through
what I
in the
spend most of my
podcast
time on.
version of this.
It is. We opened it up. We sort of had it. We said we want, and we got, I think about 2,700 host applications. From now, these are all over and so first we had to figure out, like, well, we need to narrow it down. We need to figure out what city. So where does it feel like there's talent, producer talent, host talent? What cities? And so we've settled on a couple of cities where we think there's a lot of producer talent and host talent. But it's really hard. It's an incredibly hard question. It is the question because podcasting is a talent-driven medium. There are no great podcasts that don't have great hosts. There are no such thing. You just cannot do it without somebody who is super charismatic, smart, warm, and can make this intimate connection. And so I've spent not all my time, but a huge percentage of the time that me and my colleagues are spending is just listening to people, talking to people, listening to them some more, thinking like, how are they going to do? And I think we're going to end up, I'm sure we'll fuck up. I'm sure we'll hire bad hosts and regret it. But I think we are going to hire people who are unusual. I think we're going to hire people who don't come out of a traditional NPR background necessarily, or if they do, they've been in it sideways. I think it's going to be people who are incredible storytellers, people who are like, the way I've been phrasing it is I've been asking people who live in these cities, like, who do you know? Who's the person who, when you're like, you run into them, you're so full of joy, it makes you so happy, you always want to hear them, and they always have something interesting to say. And some of the times those people are media people, but a lot of them aren't. And just
I would look at the Moth and go around and look at a bunch of places that have done local, people who have host and are involved. Sorry, I was just spitballing. I was just the way you're describing it reminds me
100%.
of how I feel about Moth community events.
Yes, 100%. That is 100%. I have one of my favorite people I'm talking to right now is Snap Judgment, which is similar to the Moth with storytelling and just an amazing new kind of voice.
I'm not good at that despite doing this, or maybe because I do this or whatever. I do this because I'm terrible at that. And that would be a really good, I just that's, those, I would say there's some of the best hours I've spent in the car are with the Moth and their local shows. I
don't mean to excite your expectations, but I have been talking to a group who does a storytelling Moth-like storytelling thing about taking over in lieu of fun for a day for a cool project that they are thinking of doing on Crowdcast. And I suggested that they move their operation to Crowdcast and offered in lieu of fun for a day for them to test it out. Alice Lee, the floor is yours.
Hi, Alice.
Hi. So I think you've clearly thought about this question, but I don't feel like you've quite addressed it yet. How is this different from NPR? Or, so I'm in the Boston area. Maybe I'm spoiled for NPR funding.
We're a little spoiled.
Yeah. But how is it different, especially when you said you're looking for a liberal audience?
Well, sorry to interrupt. I'm not looking for a liberal audience. I think we will end up with a liberal audience because I think that's what audiences are. it's different from NPR. How is it different from NPR? I think NPR attempts to be news, and is attempting to be a kind of primary source of news. We will have news, but it is not the purpose of this is not primarily to inform, but rather to kind of to create feeling. I guess I don't know what the right verb is, what the parallel verb is to inform, not to inflame. And I think there's a kind of, NPR has a lot of daily podcasts now in cities. I listen to a lot of them, and some of them are good. The one in Seattle, I think, is fantastic. It's called Seattle Now. But I listen to a lot of the other ones, and there's a insipidness to them that I think is really troublesome. They don't have a point of view on what they're doing. They have
they're news.
Well, they're news, but they're also
news?
they have the podcasts have the kind of winsome cuteness that I think afflicts NPR, and it doesn't. You don't come away feeling like, man, I really know what this reporter feels about this particular thing. You come away thinking like, oh, that was a cute story about those dairy farmers, and that's not. I don't think that's not our ambition. Our ambition is really to be like, you're going to come away with a feeling about this, like that is intense in one way or another. And in that way, actually, I actually do think the analogy is much closer to talk radio than it is to NPR. I think there's a wimpiness to NPR that's still there, and
wimpiness is
all
the
time,
best.
but enough of it.
So you want
Especially the local level.
You want like a hard-hitting, like city champion who's gonna fight against the villains of the city and defend the city from outside critics.
Yeah, yes, or welcome the outside, or yes, hard hitting. When I think of like who I was thinking like who's somebody who I would love to do it. I'm not sure how you guys feel about this, but Jake Tapper is somebody who, when I watched, Jake's a national person, but I was thinking like, if Jake Tapper were like a local, Jake is like passionate. He asks really hard questions. He's like unapologetically aggressive about what he's doing. He's deeply feeling like if I can get like a bunch of people who can convey the way that Jake can do it on TV in the pod form, I think we'd be in clover.
Yeah, interesting.
Steve
I love that.
Grathwohl, the floor is yours.
Okay, so there's some non-stupid people out there tossing around the term sedition to characterize the Congress critters who will be challenging the election results tomorrow in Congress. Tom Nichols calls them the Sedition Caucus. The title of his Atlantic piece is Worse Than Treason. So, can you discuss what sedition is legally and how close to that line Hawley, Cruz, and their ilk come?
Funny you should ask that question, because I have spent a lot of time recently, quality time, with the 18 U.S.C. 2384, the seditious conspiracy statute. And I can answer this question. So for those of you who want to take a look at the statute and read along, here it is. And I'm going to leave out some of this because I don't want to go on a lengthy tirade about this. But the relevant language, in my opinion, is the following. If two or more people in any state or territory or any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States conspire to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the United States, or oppose by force the authority thereof, or, here's the key language, by force to prevent or delay the execution of any law, or seize, take, or possess any property of the United States, that is a seditious conspiracy. So it seems to me 3 things need to happen before you're in the language of seditious conspiracy, 2 of which are very clearly happening, and the 3rd of which is not. The first is that 2 or more people need to plot. That is clearly happening. The second is that the legitimate authority of the United States, at least after January 20th, is in fact being challenged. Now, what is not happening is that is happening by force, or that territory is being occupied, or the laws of the United States are being impeded. The execution of the laws are being impeded. So I think you have 2 of the 3 major elements. I mean, you can subdivide, and like if you were actually going to prosecute something, you would break this out by elements of the offense.
There's a lot of commas to argue over in that.
Exactly. Like, so we're talking.
I'm not joking. There's like a lot of commas.
We're talking at a pretty high level of altitude here, but the thing that is missing is somebody doing something or plotting something by force to effectuate any of this. Now, if the president were to refuse to leave the White House after January 20th, I think the terms of the statute are met, right? If you occupy the White House on grounds that you are the legitimate president and the incumbent president who's been sworn in lawfully is not, and you have any help in doing that, I think that is a seditious conspiracy. I don't think voting any way in Congress by itself can be a seditious conspiracy. That's my, like, it can be a lot of things. It can be, among other things, if you do it in Congress, it's subject to the speech and debate immunity, so you can't be prosecuted for it. So there's a lot of things, but I also think without the element of use of force, it can't really be a seditious conspiracy.
Has anyone who has been prosecuted for sedition successfully?
The most recent major seditious conspiracy case was Sheikh Omar Abdulrahman and the associated Ramzi Youssef, and they were actually the people who did the first World Trade Center bombing and killed Mayor Kahana, which, of all the people to kill in the world, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it was part of a seditious, they were charged with a seditious conspiracy, and they were all convicted of it, and Omar Abdulrahman spent the rest of his life in the Supermax. So that's the best short answer I can give you. There's a much longer answer, but it's in the way of filling out those details. Our last question,
I have no
which
idea
should be for David,
for sedition.
Not for me, is from Avi Schwartz.
Hello. Can you hear me all right? Hi.
Yeah. That's quite a bookshelf you got there.
I was just about to say, it seems like
there's some UFCs there.
No, yeah. I actually think those are, if I had to guess, I want to say those are Jewish texts.
It's all Jewish. It's all Jewish.
Oh, really? Damn it.
Yeah.
I can tell
that's
from the bindings.
They look like case law books.
But they are law codes. So you're close.
That's
anyway, my question is, what do you make of Republicans starting to attack democracy as a good thing or even as a value we should have? And is there anything to do about that?
What do you think about that, David? Like, Mike Lee gave a speech where he basically said, this whole democracy thing is really overrated.
Ben, just yesterday you said that you would respect these people more if they just said that they didn't respect democracy and came right out with it.
I am not complaining about it. I actually think, there was something admirably Schmittian about it. What do you like? But there's something terrifying about it. It's like, he's a freaking member of the Senate.
Well, but
I know.
I didn't see Mike Lee's speech. We don't. I guess it always no one believes in democracy in the sense that no one believes that actually all decisions should be voted on by by everybody. They believe in democracy.
That's referendum. That's pure
Yeah.
democracy. We have
Yeah.
Republican democracy, right?
Right. Who doesn't believe? I mean, do they not believe in that? Is that what they're saying? They don't believe in that? I think
Well,
they still.
it'd be interesting to see what Mike Lee actually said. I will do my homework and read the relevant speech overnight. And I can report back on it tomorrow, but I can't say to you chapter and verse. But it does seem like a whole bunch of them are basically saying it's more important for us to win than to follow anything like what we would have, a year ago described as the rules. Right?
I don't know. I think it's a lot of rhetoric. It just doesn't sound like anything particularly useful or interesting to me, or like some type of like great political scientist statement about like the future of democracy or what democracy means. It means that somebody doesn't like the results, or that somebody thinks the process is tainted, and so they said democracy is dead and they don't believe in democracy anymore. They believe in principles or values, and it just kind of seems like rhetoric to me. But every time someone asks me this question, 90% of the time I'm kind of like, they're like, what do you think about this thing that this politician said? And I'm like, sounds like bullshit rhetoric to me, because it doesn't have any like legal sway or real implication. But that's not as fun a response as you'll get on MSNBC, I'm sure. So, or
Well,
Fox,
but then also then they go ahead and do what they're doing tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which is, it's going to be bullshit. Nothing's going to happen, but it's still
right.
Like you cause enough
we'll
rot, you rust enough beams, the thing fucking collapses one day.
No, I think that's true.
How alarmed are you about, like, I guess, the rot in the floorboards?
Me? Oh, I'm like 100%. A million % alarmed. Completely don't think that the government that I believed I lived in will exist in that form when my children are my age. Like I think we got, by the time we're dead, it will not feel like what we thought this government was.
Interesting. I didn't mean that in like I said interesting because I haven't said, no one said it that flatly before. Like, and I think I'm not that afraid. I have to be honest. I'm not feeling great. That's like, I don't know that but maybe I just don't have enough. And I say this really, like, we make fun of how young I am on the show, but I'm serious. Like, maybe I just do not have like enough experience watching people, like watching the tiny little kind of like henpecks at like the system of government. Like you said, it's like just one more beam. It's just one more thing. And it kind of rots. And like, then like, that's all it takes. Even in the rhetoric.
It's funny, David and we're almost exactly the same age, and we're of an age that, like, we're like the last generation, assuming there isn't another one, that has this experience of remembering government being something that worked really well and that we relied on and that we believed in, and the only question was, how much do you believe in it, right? But there wasn't this this succession of spectacular failures that caused, when we were 20, you didn't look around and say, wow, the US government really doesn't work. Right? Or like, it doesn't matter how you vote. Like, when we were 20, the Soviet Union was falling, and then,
that's key.
Things really looked like they'd worked pretty well.
Can I actually, I forget who was on the other day, but they said something that really coalesced, was like, maybe it was Norm, but he basically said that it was like that the lack of like an external foreign adversary to the United States is one of the reasons that like things have become, which is not a new or unique thing to say, but I think it's worth like refreshing on, has changed it. And it's it's interesting to me that you're like, you bring up this, like, you had all of this fear from outside, but inside it felt and you remember it feeling like something that worked. And I don't feel any fear from, frankly, even from Russia, maybe from China, and a few other states like Iran. And like, I don't spend a lot of time, like, I don't know, am I like, maybe I'm completely off base here, but I just think that this is kind of, it's interesting that you brought up the fact that like Russia was part of your memory. Like Russia as an adversary is part of your memory of government being good in the U.S.
Well, so I didn't say good. I meant like there were lots of things we complained about government about, but I don't think people had a sense that, like, the pervasive sense that exists now, that it's dysfunctional, that it didn't work. Ronald Reagan came in, he wanted to do a whole lot of things, and he did a lot of them, right? And
I don't know. I mean, remember talking to Mike Kinsley about this, and I was asking him what 1968 was like, and he was saying 1968 was like, you just really weren't sure that anything was going to, you thought the revolution was probably coming next week. It wasn't really worth, it wasn't even worth going grocery shopping, really, because anything could change in the next, I think.
But we were born in 1969 and 1970.
Yeah, no, but
we didn't have the 68.
There was a period of enormous instability in the late 60s, even though if you looked at it across that span from 1945 to 2000, it would pop up, and we didn't collapse, but I think people living through it felt there's craziness happening.
Speaking of collapse, it is 6:07, which means we should like end the show or something. David
we should
Plotz,
pick this up at some point. This was a fun way to end. I feel like we might be able to like disagree about this some more.
Good.
I don't know.
Super fun to have you on the show. Congratulations on 15 years of the Gab Fest.
I can't believe that. That makes me feel old.
Yeah. Wow. Kate, we don't know who our guest is tomorrow yet, right?
No, we're gonna wait.
It's gonna be the Proud Boys. We're gonna get them off out of Freedom Plaza. Sit down with us.
Kathleen's coming on Thursday.
Yeah, we're gonna keep her separate from them because we'd rather they not know she exists. We're gonna have the Proud Boys on tomorrow. We're gonna have a civilized conversation. Persuade them.
I love that his internet just cut out. Like the most perfect. We're gonna have them on and persuade. We're gonna have a civilized.
Did call me and she said she would come on if only Ben weren't there.
Yeah.
Who said that?
Taylor.
No one. Don't worry about it, Ben.
Oh, we're going to persuade them of the errors of their ways. They're going to turn off my internet. And, that'll be 22 hours and 51 minutes from now. And until then, Kate.
We don't have fun anymore, but at least we have new podcasts to look forward to. I am legitimately excited for CityCast. What a great idea.
We're going to have podcasts in every city. And we're not going to have the U.S. government anymore, but at least there will be podcasts. David Plotz,